Welcome to Seeking Numina, the Sacred Places podcast. Today I am joined by Mhara Starling to talk about the Welsh gods and their spirits of place. Mhara, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to read a little bit about you for our listeners. Born and raised in North Wales and a first language Welsh speaker, Mhara Starling is a Welsh folk witch who writes about Welsh mythology, folklore, and magic. Mhara is the author of Y Mabinogi, Welsh Witchcraft, A Guide to the Spirits, Lore, and Magic of Wales, and Welsh Fairies, A Guide to the Legends, Lore, Denizens, and Deities of the Otherworld. And I've got a couple of those books here. Welsh Fairies, I adored, loved this book. And then when I saw the Pantheon come out, with Moon Books for the Welsh, I was really excited to be able to have you on the show to talk about it. So thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Welcome to Seeking Numina. I'm your host, Elyse Welles, and I invite you to connect with the sacred wild within and around you through Numina, or sacred sites around the world, and the wisdom they hold. Together, let's remember the old ways, build relationships with land spirits, and dare to reach out to the fairies. The sacred wild is inviting you to dance in the moonlight. Will you answer their call?
So I would love to start with the story you start off the Welsh Pantheon book with about the standing stones that called you home when you were just a wee one.
Oh, yes. Oh, gosh. It's kind of almost become my origin story, which I tell people whenever they ask, how did you get into this stuff? How did you get into witchcraft and magic and polytheism? What drew you to this? I always mention that that's a difficult question to answer. Like, when did this all start? Because did it start when my love for mythology and folklore started when I was a child? Did it start when I used to play act that I was a witch in my bedroom mixing potions and stuff? Where exactly did it start? But I always think back to one particular moment in my youth. I had a very strange upbringing in terms of I was not always very accepted amongst my community, amongst the people I went to school with and such. I was a strange little queer child who didn't quite fit the mold of what people wanted me to be. I liked things that people said I shouldn't like. I did things that people said I shouldn't be doing, things like this. So I spent a lot of time alone, just exploring the land, exploring the area that I grew up in. And I was very fortunate to have grown up in a rural area by the sea, absolutely lovely. And outside of like tourist season, outside of the summer months, it's so quiet. Nobody really comes there. So you can walk along the coastal paths for miles and miles and never see a solitary single person for hours on end. And I kind of loved that time. I loved those times when I could just go out and be alone. But there was one particular place that I always was drawn to. And that was always my place that I would go to if I felt low, if I felt a little depressed, if I felt a little overwhelmed by life, or if I was feeling joyful and happy and I wanted to just be with my land, with my place. And that place in particular was a cliff that overlooks the sea. And that cliff is, I always describe it as a place where the three realms of land, of sea, and of sky, they sing in such harmony together in that space. You're stood there on this grassy cliff, overlooking these rocky little ports and points down below, and the sandy beach to the left of you, and then the waves rolling in, the sky above you just stretching out for miles, and the mountains of Eryri, which is one of our national parks, the Eryri mountain range, they're just there in the distance across on the horizon. And there, just on that cliff, overlooking that view, that beautiful, beautiful view, there's these strange little rocks that are just kind of dotted around in almost like a half moon almost shape on the floor. So it's not a full circle, it's almost like a half moon crescent shape. And I used to always go and I'd sit with these rocks almost circling the front of me, and I'd look out, and sometimes I'd speak to the land, I'd speak to the sky, I'd speak to the sea. That's where I would sing to what I now would call gods or deities, but back then I just referred to as friends that I couldn't see, friends that I couldn't quite see or understand, but they were there and they were listening. So I always say to people, I never grew up going to church and praying. That was my version of praying, going to this place and singing and speaking to the land right there and just watching the land around me change, the birds flying, the sea rolling in, the tide coming in and then going out again, the wind just buffeting against my face. And then a few years into coming to paganism and witchcraft and polytheism, I became a little obsessed with ancient monuments. I loved going to standing stones and circles of stones and burial chambers. And there's lots and lots and lots on this island that I live on. There's so many. This area is dotted with these ancient monuments. And I used to always get really upset, going, why do we have so many ancient monuments around us, but there's nothing here in this village and on this coastal path? What's going on there? And then I found a book. And this book was an archaeological guide to the island, talking about all the various different ancient spaces that exist here. And there, in the contents page, was the name of my village, Aberfrau. And I looked at it and I thought, we don't have anything here. What's going on? We have like, there was an old castle that used to stand here, but that was torn down by the Normans, so that's not there anymore. We had a Roman kind of occupation area, but that's all underground. You can't see it. So what could this be referring to? And I skipped to the page that talked about my village, and there, right on that page, the first thing I saw was the words Trwyn Dy. And Trwyn Dy is the name of that cliff that overlooks the sea. And I thought to myself, what? What? That's where I always go. That's where I'm always drawn to. And those stones that I thought were just natural, like parts of the landscape, those rocks that were in this semicircle phase, they were part of an ancient cairn, an ancient Bronze Age cairn. And that area, there was archaeological evidence of human occupation there going back 10,000 years. But this cairn dated back to the Bronze Age and was where they used to burn offerings of hazelnuts and they used to lay the ashes and the bones of their dead. So it was a place that people gathered to be in contact or in compact in some way with the dead, with the numinous, with the other world. And it was at one point a full circle. So nowadays it's only half a circle because the rest of the circle is underground. It's been covered by sand and debris and dirt. But those rocks that are poking out of the soil, those are the remnants of this circle that used to stand there. And right there where I used to sit was where they would have piled the bones and the ashes and the offerings. So I thought to myself, this is strange because it's almost as though the land has told me that this place is sacred, even though I had no idea. I was just constantly drawn here. So I do genuinely believe the land sometimes guides us and tells us where to go.
Oh my gosh, that is like the most beautiful story. And it's so, I had goosebumps a lot while you were talking. I know that sounds very cliche to say, but it was true. And particularly when you said about you would go there when you're happy too. And I think that's like, I think the two questions I get a lot about land spirits work is one, is it selfish to put my sadness and sorrow onto land? And two, like, people are often I think they worry they'll like wear out their welcome with deities or with places or like anyone they go to consult. I think they, naturally have this, it's a thoughtful consideration, but it's a very human one of worrying that we're too much. It's the too much wound, right? And I love that you were there for both things. And that's it's crazy too. Like I feel like our upbringings were pretty similar. Like we did go to church. We went to Orthodox church, and it was few and far between. They kicked me out of Sunday school for asking too many questions. But I didn't understand sin. I just couldn't get behind it, and still can't. But we did the same. I had a very interesting like I had pretty strict helicopter parents, so I was only allowed to play outside alone. Like I wasn't really allowed to like join with the other kids. So I was outside all the time. We had woods when we were in the US, and when I lived in Greece, we had the sea. Same, like just you could walk. Now you will see a few more houses, but then you could walk a good 10 miles before you would see anything but a little coffee shop off the coast. And we would go to the Temple of Artemis all the time, and it was the same thing. It was just this I never had to be told it was there. It's hard to say when it started. Like the land has just, and I had a few trees in our woods in Pennsylvania that there was one I would go to particularly when I was really sad. And then one I would go to particularly with a lot of joy. And there was this area that I could lay in the woods and look up and see birds going to their nests. And I would ask them for help with my math homework. I would literally be like, 1 plus 6, like, what is that? And then I would count how many birds came overhead, and then I would check, and it would be right. Like things like that. I mean, it's so beautiful the way as kids we don't question these things, and as adults, it's so much easier to access this work. We kind of start ahead of the game, I think, and it's lovely to be able to bring that to other people, and it's so validating, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of become my way of ensuring that, my relationship with the spirits of this land are not this almost one-way street where it's like I come there and I pour out my emotions. And, they do help. They almost always help in some way or another. Something comes along, whether it is that sense of comfort and relief and almost like you're being nurtured by the spirits of place. Or if it's, a slap on the wrist or a slap across the face telling you, buck up, come on. You don't need to be crying here with us. You need to do something about it. They always somehow offer advice and help when you go to them in times of crisis. But I love going there in times of celebration and reverence as well, and just in love of the place. And nowadays, I spend a lot of my time taking people on tours and such of the island I live on, and I always take them there and I mention what this place is because, as I mentioned, we have all of these different ancient monuments across the island, and some of them get more attention than others. So I try and kind of make it a point of making people aware that sometimes there are things directly beneath our feet that we perhaps aren't aware of. Everywhere in the land probably has something that someone at some point considered sacred, whether it is an ancient monument like this that was a place of the dead, a place of reverence, a place of, that numinous quality of these spaces, or whether it's just a tree that used to offer someone shade on a nice day, or a river that people used to bathe in when it was too hot, or something like that. There's always somewhere that somebody considered sacred. So you will be drawn to those places naturally. And it's lovely to share with them, not just, in terms of sharing with them your emotions and place, but share with them your community and your people.
Yes. Oh, I wish we had a party tree like Bilbo did, you know? Like that's to me like the ultimate modern sacred place that the village, well, we don't have many villages left in the US, but the idea of, that place that cares for one another, the metaphorical village, if we had the party tree equivalent of of a land spirit.
No, absolutely.
So I'd love to ask you about the fairies of Wales and or better, Cymru? Is that how you
Cymru,
say
yeah.
that? Cymru.
Cymru.
Yeah, I've been working on that because it's the same with Greece. Like Greece is not what we call our country. We call it Elada. I have no idea where Greece came from. I mean, I do because I Googled it, but it's the Germans.
Yeah.
It's always whoever the latest colonizer is. Um, so yeah, tell us a bit about the fairies or the spirits of place and the difference between the Ituilith Tig and the one I really I'm gonna butcher so bad.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There we go. Tell us about them.
So I've always been aware of the fairy folklore that exists in this area because a little bit obsessive with fairies and magic and mythology growing up. And I remember my first day of school, I said to my teachers, I went to like a little village school. It was only 26 students in total, so we were very privileged to have the teachers spend a lot of time with us and get to know us and such. And I remember on one of my very early days of school, my teachers asked me, "What kind of things are you interested in?" And I just outright answered, "Dwi licio tylwyth teg, mor fodlon a gwrachod," which is I love fairies and mermaids and witches. That's my thing. And they turned me to the direction of the books they had in the school, and they said, well, if you're interested in those things, rather than just watching Disney films and, reading children's books about them written in English, why don't you learn about the folklore of this land, of this place? Because we have so many stories about fairies and mermaids and magic and giants and all of these things. So I became a little obsessive, very young child. And they were part and package of the landscape as well and the culture. So it wasn't just through story or through books that I interacted with these beings. They were part and package of who we were as a people. So we have different parts of the land that carry names that seem to be associated with fairies. So, we'll have areas that are called things like Bryn y Tylwyth Teg, which is the Fairy Hill, or we'll have a place that we might refer to as Lôn y Pwca or Lôn y Bwbach, which is like the road of the hobgoblin or the road of the mischievous little fairies or something. So we have these features in the landscape that seem to carry this echo of something older. And we had some of those in the village that I grew up in as well. There was one hill in particular that was always referred to where I grew up as the Hill of the Fairies or Bryn y Tylwyth Teg. And on top of this hill, there was like a marker, like a little monument that just marked that that was the highest point of elevation in the village. But everybody, my age, we always whispered, oh, that's the entryway into the hill. The hill underneath is hollow. They all live under the hill, the fairies, the Tylwyth Teg, and they enter into the hill through this monument. They go through the top of it. And I always used to love that kind of story. But then growing up and becoming even more nerdy when it comes to these things, I developed an interest in learning about the etymology of the terms that we use, the history of where they come from. And of course, the first big thing to really point out is that when we talk about fairies within a Welsh context, even more broadly in like a Celtic context, we're not talking about Tinkerbell, we're not talking about the flower fairies of Cicely Mary Barker, we're not speaking about, these small little feminine creatures with beautiful flower petal skirts and glitter coming out of their bum and, big gossamer wings and stuff. We're not talking about that. We're talking about otherworldly visitors or otherworldly entities, these beings who exist or straddle between our world and the other world. And they are sometimes, a little scary, a little daunting. They exist in a way that we perhaps cannot fully perceive or comprehend as humans. And sometimes they interact with us in folktale, in story, and in just folk belief in general. They interact with us and they're constantly almost watching over us and interacting with us, sometimes without us knowing. But then on the flip side, so those fairies that are the otherworldly visitors, they're referred to as a Tylwyth Teg, which translates to mean the fair folk or the fair family, which in part is a euphemism. We refer to them as the fair family because we don't want to offend them, because sometimes they are not fair. They are not good people. But we call them the good fair people because, we don't want to be on the wrong side of their wrath if they decide that we've offended them in some way, because they can cause a whole world of hurt if they so wish. But we refer to them as the fair folk, partly because it's a euphemism, but also partly because they're known for rather beautiful and ethereal in their nature, but they are otherworldly. They live and operate in the other world. They just visit our world sometimes because our world and the other world within our belief system is quite intimately connected. But then there are these other creatures, and these other creatures are like these almost middle ground between those otherworldly creatures and us. So these are entities that exist in the land around us at all times. They're known for haunting old places or deep dark forests or, lakes and ponds or anywhere with water and things like that. And they usually have associations with specific features in the natural world. So they're not necessarily the spirits of natural things. So they're not always, the spirit of the trees or the spirit of the stones, but they're usually spirits that are attached to those places really, really intimately. And because of that, if you are interacting with those places on a spiritual or magical level, it would be somewhat foolish to not acknowledge them and respect them, because it's just polite to acknowledge that they are there. To If you're going to stumble into someone's house, it's nice to at least say hello first. So those are what we refer to as the Ellyllion, which is often translated to mean elf when people translate it from Welsh to English, but it doesn't really translate. It's not elf, it's just that's the closest thing that some people find. If you go to the dictionary and you look at the definitions of the word in English, they will say that it's elf, goblin, phantom, demon, any of these creatures, or nature spirit, spirits of the natural world, woodland creatures and deities and such. So they encompass a lot of different entities. And the Eich, they are known for haunting the, ancient monuments, caves, lakes, forests, and they dance under moonlit nights on the meadows. They can cause all sorts of bad things to happen to you, or they can entice you into these glorious dances and make you eat the most delightful of foods, and then you find yourself trapped there for 100 years. Why not? So these creatures, they have a strong place in our folklore and our folk belief, but within the practice of magic that is rooted here, they are also seen as sacred beings that we need to respect and need to have some form of reverence for because of their deep, profound connection to this liminal, otherworldly, and natural quality that they hold. So they're powerful beings. But there's also different names for different versions of these beings as well. So we have the Echich, which are just everywhere. That's just a basic common name for them. But then we have the Puka. The Puka is a mischievous little shape-shifting goblin who sometimes comes into the house, and when it comes into the house, it can cause all manners of horrible things to happen in the house unless you give it offerings, and then it might become good friends with you. But on the other side, we have Bupach, and the Bupach is a household fairy, a creature that is deeply associated with the spirit of your household and your hearth. So you give offerings to the hearth or the household goblin or spirit in order to appease your home. Your home is very much alive within this belief system. Then you have the various different spirits of various locations. So the Cobblenai, for example. Cobblenai are subterranean creatures, so they exist beneath the earth. They live in the caves, the mines, things like that. So they are. Sometimes people say they're the spirits of mines. I argue they're more so the spirits of the stones that exist in the mine, because it's believed that, if it's a new mine, if it's a new mine that they're digging into to get ore and stone and such, it's more likely there are more Kublai there than in old mines where the ore has been stripped and gone away. So I kind of
Mm.
believe because of that, they're the spirits of the stones rather than the spirits of the mining industry itself. I think they're older than the mining industry, probably. So we have various different things like this, spirits of the water, the land, the sea, the sky, all of these different beings, and they represent our connection with these places as well. So it's important to at least give them a little bow when we're out in the open.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. It's really interesting because I've been realizing more and more. So I'm going to Wales. I'm actually going to Inishmaan. Um, I know at the end of July, in the July 23rd to the 27th, and I was gonna see Wales. And then I was like, no, the more I was researching, I was like, I'm literally only gonna be in Anglesey because there's just too much to see, and I'd rather just enjoy my first time ever in your country. I want to see the place that I've heard the most about, that I'm actually most excited to go to. And so I've been researching a little bit more, and it's interesting because I didn't come upon this yet, and it's like I was meant to hear it from you. I know that now. But I was researching more about the I guess you could say cosmology or the spiritual background and beliefs of the when you're talking about the Welsh people, it's Cymru, right?
Yeah,
I think
Cymru, yeah.
yeah, Cymru. And it's very similar to Greece, like very similar. And it's a lot of Bronze Age origin. Bronze Age origin is what I work with in Greece as well, like the pre-patriarchal work of the Mycenaeans and the Minoans. And we have, instead of like the echichon, we have the stichia. And it's the same idea. They're like these deep, dark, kind of darker elementals in the sense that they're more powerful and they need to be appeased. And so even now, even though Greece is 98% Greek Orthodox, you will still see, if you go to the local spring, you'll still see offerings being left there by every first harvest, for every first harvest at each turn of the wheel.
Yeah, and what I find fascinating about modern day Cymru or Wales is that, we are a nation that if you were to go to a city or to a town and you were to stop people on the street and ask them, do you believe in fairies? Do you believe in the Echich? Do you believe in the Tylwyth Teg? Most likely you'll get people telling you, absolutely not. Of course not. That's silly. I don't do that at all. But, and that but that they say afterwards carries so much weight because what comes after that but is things like, but my grandmother had a story about how she had a household fairy and now we have to leave butter to it every night or else our shoes always go missing. Or, they'll say, but we leave a little offering at, the standing stone that's at the bottom of that field on our farm because we know the and they might do all sorts of nasty things to us if we don't appease them because we work their land. So it's like there is still this quality if you ask people on a deeper level, there is still a continuation of fairy faith almost. And I love that. It's similar with ghosts and things, people will say, no, 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 don't believe in these things, but then their actions speak
Yep.
louder than their words.
Yep. It's all in that but after. It's the same in
Absolutely.
Greece. If you say, oh, like, do you believe in the Psyche? Do you believe in the nymphs? No, no. But, and they'll say, we do plant our basil in our front yard and we do, they always still do all of the things. Like it's amazing to me. Wow, that's really, really cool. Um, I think we have time for one more. Yeah, let's talk about one more thing here. Um, you in the book you talk about in the Pantheon, the Welsh book, you talk about the expressions of sound. And this is me wanting to know. So hopefully listeners also want to know. But I really we so in the eclectic fairy tradition, that's my witchcraft tradition, we work with the fae, we work with land spirits, and we use different tones to activate different parts of the body, but also the work I've added to our lineage is how do you then use that to speak to land? And I watched a documentary on the plane back from Greece like 3 days ago about a curandera in Brazil. And she was talking about Icaros, which are songs to the land that the land have that they teach you to sing to them. Like it's like you can only hear that song at that place and you can only sing it there. And I've experienced that in Greece at different places as well. There's this song in the land and you can't get it out of your head. And I've experienced it a few times in the US. Like I'm at the bottom of the Susquehanna River here. She is the oldest river in the world, which is crazy. In America, just hanging out here with no conversations about it, except for me, because I tell everybody. So tell us a bit about, I guess we'll just focus on one, the oh sounds. That one really spoke to me.
Yeah, so in order to talk about that, we kind of have to delve into another part of our cosmology, and that's
Yes,
the
do it.
belief in Awen. And Awen is really important within the history of Wales, even to the modern day of Wales. Like, this is something that still exists within the common culture of Wales in general. So Awen doesn't have a direct translation into English, and there's so many people who have tried to translate it, and they always kind of diminish it a little bit when they do translate it, because people will say like, oh, it's inspiration. And it's kind of like, well, no, it's not inspiration because if it was inspiration, why do we have another word for inspiration in Welsh, which is ysbrydoliaeth? Why would we call inspiration ysbrydoliaeth if awen means inspiration? It's more than inspiration. But also, you're not wrong, it is kind of inspiration. So it's this complicated force, this idea that exists within our culture. And the only way that I can fully describe it is by almost telling a story. And that story is that in the other world, in the depths of the other world, divine hands, they forge and form the force of Awen with their hands. They sculpt it into being. And then once it's ready to be distributed, they send it out through the other world. And through the world, it flows like a river or like a breeze. And eventually, because our world and the other world is connected, they eventually make their way out of the other world and into our world. And here, just as in the other world, they flow like a breeze or like a river. And as they flow on the breeze, on the air, they eventually find their way to us. The Awen itself, it finds its way to us and we breathe it in. It exists in everything, it emanates in everything. So we breathe it in through the air. And when we breathe it in, it takes hold within us. And through this almost symbiotic relationship between our humanity and this otherworldly divine force, we then have no choice but to birth something profound into the world. Once the Awen has taken hold, we can't help it. We have to birth something profound into the world. And within our cultural understanding of the world, the way in which those profound things are usually expressed through humans is through song, through poetry, through words, through prophecy, or through magic. So it's these things that carry the weight of Awen, and the most profound poems, songs, prophecies, or spells of magic, the most profound and most life-changing and life-altering ones are those which are created with this force of Awen flowing through them constantly. And Awen is weird because it translates literally if we were to break down the word. So Awen is composed of the words for breath or for holy breath almost. So it's the breath that is inherently divine and connects us to something beyond ourselves, but it's also inherently blessed and mystical in its nature. So it comes from this otherworldly source. So rather than inspiration, I would translate Awen to mean the divine breath of hope, blessed inspiration that is otherworldly in its nature, which I know is not a very concise translation. But the Awen, it's believed, makes a sound, and that sound reflects the sound of the universe itself and the sounds of all existences. So the sounds of Awen are usually presented via vowel sounds. So we believe that the vowel sounds that we speak with in general conversation carry a little bit of the Awen. So the vowel sounds in Welsh are a, e, o, i, u, so you could, in order to connect with Awen, sing all of that. You could go a, e, o, I, u, and just go through all of those syllables. But the ones that we focus on primarily within modern polytheism and druidry are those that connect us to place specifically. And the sound that connects you to place specifically is composed of three sounds, and those three sounds are o, E and oo. So it goes like an oi when you sing it. It makes this almost like oi kind of noise, which almost sounds like something vibrating with some kind of power within it. So each of these sounds, the o, the e, and the oo, are connected with what we refer to as the three realms of existence. And the realms are the land, the sea, and the sky. So the three areas that we usually interact with the most as humans. So the land is represented by the sound of ooh. And it's that like deep, reverent ooh noise that kind of vibrates right down into your diaphragm, into your gut. Whereas the sky, which is above us, is an e noise because reverberates outwards and expresses the sound of sky in and of itself. And then the sea is oh. Oh wait, oh e oo. Yeah, oh e oo. So oh is the sound of sea because it connects us to something that is beyond ourselves. The sea is that connecting force, which is this liminal place where beyond the sea, if you're stood at the shore of the sea, anything could be out there. And because of that, our mythology tends to reflect that the other world or the afterlife or any of these different things is located beyond the sea, to the sea. So awe connects us to almost like the collective experience of humanity, but the sea itself as well. And then
Hmm.
all of these things connect to, our experience, our bodily and physical experience of reality. The E, which connects you with sky, also connects you with breath, your vital life force. The Oo, which connects you to land, connects you to your body and the physical sensations that you feel when you touch something, or you eat something, or you smell something. And then the Awe, which connects you to sea, connects you to the spiritual aspects of life, connects you to the unseen and the shared collective that we all have, that we can all connect to. So the unseen forces of the world. So we can sing those things when we are at these places. We sing the ones that we need to the most, or we sing them all together. And one of my favorite things to do is to gather a room full of people, or, go to these ancient monuments, which some of which are burial chambers, which are almost like caves built into the hills themselves. And if you go inside with a group of people and you get everyone there to sing these three vowel sounds, the O, the E, and the Oo, simultaneously, eventually the sounds blur together and the place starts to vibrate, and you get this sense of miraculous is about to happen. And through that singing, you are then singing directly the Awen, which is that force of divine moving inspiration, which connects you to something beyond yourself. So through doing that, you might connect with something that will change you profoundly. But all you're doing essentially is singing in accordance with the spirit of the land, the sea, and the sky, your experience of the world around you.
That is so beautiful. So, so beautiful. And it's really wild because I've asked my high priest, I'm a why person. Like if I don't know why, like I can't do a thing. And so I was very annoying as a student. And I ended up doing my master's in modern witchcraft, like 1880 to present, because I had too many questions. And that was one of the questions I had is like, where did we get these sounds from? And she said Hinduism. When I was in India, nobody knew what I was talking about. So now I'm really wondering if we got this somehow from some Welsh lineage because we actively, it's very similar. We do ooh as the solar plexus as well. It's the same. It's exactly the same. It's right in the middle. And it's almost like the union of the, we call it like the upper and lower self. It's like the middle self. And then on the bottom, we do O, and that's like connecting our roots and our ancestors. And then we do the same. We do E for our crown, for the top, to connect to spirit and the other world.
Oh my gosh. Oh yeah, so many similarities there.
That's
Absolutely.
wild.
I do wonder, where this all comes from because a lot of people attribute the or e u in Welsh to a rather interesting historical figure known as Iolo Morgannwg, who
Oh, I
wrote it
love
down.
YOLO.
Yeah. And he was an interesting one because he's a bit of a bad boy, he's a forger, but he's also, I think, a little bit of a revolutionary. He thought of things and I think he was in contact with something beyond himself. And he was high off his tits all the time. He was, constantly taking laudanum. So there's that idea then that maybe because he was always high, maybe he was in touch with something beyond himself as well. But I genuinely think when I reverberate those sounds, I refuse to believe that it's just one guy in South Wales who created them. I think there is something deeper and more profound there. I think he just popularized them.
Yeah. Yeah. For all we know, he heard a woman doing it, but he was a
Mm,
man. So he got
exactly.
Well, Mara, thank you so much for being here. I really can't thank you enough for joining us on the show and for writing the books that you write. Again, the new one, everybody, Pantheon, the Welsh, and you've also got Welsh Witchcraft out with Llewellyn, right? That one's also
Yes.
Llewellyn, and then Welsh Fairies with Llewellyn. I'm also with Llewellyn. I love working with them. So I'm really glad that you're out here writing and taking people to these sacred places. And I really see you as a sister in this work of elevating Native voices in their lands and really giving that credence back to who's actively living it, because the Welsh fairies are not dead and gone. This is a living tradition. And they're going to be here much longer than all of us. So it's really important to have Native voices sharing that work. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a delight to talk about all this stuff.
Thank you for seeking Numina with me today. Join me at patreon.com/Elyse Welles to support this show and get access to a library of rituals, exclusive videos, meditations, and more. To learn more about my upcoming retreats, book a tarot reading, or learn with me in workshops, classes, or mentorship, visit seekingnumina.com.